While I buried my husband alone, my entire family was celebrating my sister's engagement. But they had no idea they were dancing on their own graves. My name is Elena Hartwell, and 6 months ago I stood in an empty church while my phone buzzed with 36 missed calls. 36 reminders that the people who were supposed to love me had chosen champagne over compassion. A few colleagues sat in the back. Mrs. Peterson dabbed her eyes with a tissue. But my parents, my sister Madison, my best friend Sarah, they were 20 miles away, toasting Madison's engagement while I said goodbye to the only person who ever truly loved me. But here's what they didn't know. I'm an estate planning attorney. I've spent 10 years watching families tear themselves apart over money. And in this family business, I had always been the silent partner. They chose champagne over compassion. Now they'll learn what bankruptcy tastes like. 6 months later, I watched my mother fall to her knees in my office, begging me to save them from the financial ruin I had orchestrated with surgical precision. My father, who hadn't shed a single tear at David's funeral, was crying like a child. Madison, who had texted me, "Business is business," on the day of my husband's burial, was hyperventilating about losing everything. I had transformed them from majority shareholders in my life to complete bankrupts. And the beautiful irony? I did it all legally, methodically, using every skill they had dismissed. In this family business, I was always the silent partner, but silent partners can become hostile takeovers. If you've ever been betrayed by family when you needed them most, type betrayed, so I know I'm not alone. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't just about revenge. It's about what happens when the quiet one finally speaks up. But to understand how I could destroy them so easily, I need to tell you about the funeral day. The morning of David's funeral, I believed my family would be there. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, trying to zip up that black dress with trembling fingers. David had bought it for me. "You look powerful in black," he'd said. I never imagined I'd wear it to bury him. The parking lot was nearly empty. No sign of my parents' Mercedes. No Madison's red convertible. Instead, I got a message from Madison. "Sorry, can't make it. This engagement party is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. We'll catch up later." A once-in-a-lifetime thing, as if my husband's funeral was just another Tuesday. I walked into that church alone. The pastor's voice echoed through empty pews, while my phone buzzed with photos from Madison's engagement party. There was my mother, radiant, raising champagne, my father laughing, Sarah posing with the happy couple. As an estate attorney, I'd seen families tear apart over money, but I never thought mine would bid on my grief. After the service, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Sweetheart, we need to talk soon. There are some practical matters to discuss now that David's gone." Practical matters. That evening I found Madison's purse left behind from her last visit. Inside were printed emails, conversations between her and my parents about Elena's situation and how to handle the inheritance properly. They treated my husband's death like a corporate restructuring. Eliminate the emotional shareholders, maximize the profits. The emails were dated 3 days before David died. They were calculating their gains while I held his hand in the hospital, praying for a miracle. One email from my father. "Elena's always been too emotional for big financial decisions. Madison's wedding costs are substantial, and David's life insurance could really help the family." Another from Madison. "Don't worry about the wedding budget. Elena will understand that family comes first. Business is business. She'll get over the emotional stuff eventually." Business is business. That's exactly how they saw David's death, as a business opportunity. I sat on my living room floor surrounded by legal documents and family betrayal, and something inside me shifted. The grief was still there, but underneath it, something cold and calculating was growing. That's when I realized, if they wanted to play by corporate rules, I'd show them who the real CEO was. The next morning, I did what I do best. I investigated. As an estate planning attorney, I analyze family dynamics and study financial patterns. But I'd never turned those skills on my own family before. As an estate attorney, I knew exactly which public records to check and which professional contacts could provide insights within legal bounds. Property records, business filings, court documents, all public information that painted a clear picture of their financial desperation. What I found made my blood run cold. My parents had remortgaged their house for $200,000. Madison's wedding venue, dress, ring, they'd bet their home on her happiness, counting on David's life insurance to cover the payments. The mortgage payments were set to balloon in 18 months, right when they expected access to David's money. They had counted on my husband's death to fund their daughter's fairy tale. I spent years protecting other people's legacies. Time to protect my own. I remembered Madison had listed me as her emergency contact on several accounts years ago and never updated them. Through legitimate channels, insurance forms, medical records where I was still listed, I could piece together her financial communications. Text after text, calculating how much they could reasonably ask Elena for, without seeming obvious. Messages about managing Elena's emotional state for financial cooperation. But the one that broke something inside me was Madison's voice message to her maid of honor. Elena's always been dramatic. She'll get over it. And honestly, David's life insurance is going to solve all our money problems. Sometimes things just work out, you know? My husband's death was just convenient timing for them. Madison had left her laptop open at my house during her last visit. Her email was still logged in, and what I saw there changed everything. A detailed strategy session between Madison, her fiancé, and my parents. They had researched grief counselling timelines. They knew widows make major financial decisions within 6 months of loss, when they're most vulnerable. They planned to swoop in during my weakest moments and convince me that sharing David's assets was the loving thing to do. One email from my mother. Elena's always been too trusting. If we approach this as helping her through her grief, she'll probably be grateful for the guidance, patient and caring, while I buried my husband alone. I spent 2 weeks building a case file against my own family. Bank records, email chains, phone records, social media posts timestamped during David's funeral service. They wanted to liquidate my grief. I decided to audit their greed. I started making calls to their friends, neighbours, business associates. "Oh, I was surprised not to see you at David's funeral. Did you know my family chose to attend a party instead? I wasn't lying. I was simply telling the truth and letting people draw their own conclusions. The truth has a way of spreading faster than lies." Within a week, I heard whispers, questions about my family's character, doubt about their reliability. My mother called, panicked. "Elena, people are asking strange questions about David's funeral." "The truth, Mom," I said calmly. "Just the truth." But my plan wasn't just about protecting assets. I wanted them to feel the pain they caused me. Grief had made me methodical, not weak. Every sleepless night missing David I used to plan. Every tear became fuel for something calculated. David's will was straightforward, everything to me. But as the beneficiary, I could establish new trusts and foundations from the assets I inherited. I created a complex charitable foundation in David's name with very specific conditions. Anyone who had failed to honour the deceased through their presence at final services was automatically disqualified from any role. It was elegant, legal, absolutely airtight. They wanted to treat me like a subsidiary they could control. Time to show them what happens when subsidiaries go independent. I reached out to my professional network for strategic consultation. Hypothetically, if a family planned to exploit someone's grief for financial gain, what would protect the grieving party's interests? The answers were enlightening and actionable. My colleague Sarah Chen was particularly helpful. Elena, the best defense is often a good offense. Don't wait for them to attack. Make them defend their own actions first. I needed to force their hand, make them reveal their true intentions before they could dress them up in fake concern. So I planted a seed. I called my mother, mentioning casually that I was considering major changes to my own estate planning. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, voice dripping with false concern, "you don't need to think about such morbid things. Family will always take care of family." The irony was suffocating. Within a week, I got calls. Casual check-ins from Madison, unexpected visits from my father. Suddenly, everyone was concerned about my emotional well-being and financial decision-making. They were circling like vultures, just as I'd predicted. But the real confirmation came when I received a call from Richard Morrison, an attorney I'd never heard of. He wanted to discuss potential estate planning concerns involving recent family losses. They had hired their own lawyer. I called Morrison's office. "I'm Elena Hartwell. I believe you've been in contact with my family about estate matters." The secretary sounded confused. "Oh, Mrs. Hartwell, we're actually representing your parents and sister in a potential dispute regarding—" She caught herself, but it was too late. They weren't planning to ask nicely for David's money. They were preparing to take it. I smiled for the first time since David's death. Really smiled. I called Morrison back. "Please tell your clients that their hostile takeover just became a suicide mission." That night I worked until 3 a.m., putting final pieces in place. I documented every conversation, every manipulation attempt, every false expression of concern. 2 days later, my mother called. Her voice was different now, sharper, desperate. "Elena, we need a family meeting. There are serious matters we need to discuss, and we can't put this off any longer." "Of course, Mom," I said calmly. "But this time, we'll meet at my office, and we'll do this properly." That's when I realized they weren't just greedy, they were desperate. And then, exactly as I predicted, they came to me. But this time the meeting would be on my terms. They arrived at my law office on a Tuesday morning like some twisted family reunion. My parents in their best clothes, Madison with her engagement ring catching the light, even Sarah trailing behind like a guilty shadow. I watched them through my office window, talking in hushed, urgent tones, probably rehearsing their approach. They thought they were walking into a negotiation. They had no idea they were walking into a trial. "Send them to Conference Room B," I told Janet. Conference Room B was where I met clients contesting wills. Long mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling law books, recording equipment built into the walls. Everything designed to remind people that truth mattered more than feelings. When I walked in, they were seated on one side, presenting a united front. Them against me, just like always. "You wanted a family meeting," I said, taking my seat across from them. "Fine, but we're playing by corporate rules now." My father cleared his throat. "Elena, we're concerned about you. You've been making unusual decisions lately. People are talking." "About your behaviour since David's death," my mother added. "The way you've been spreading stories, making accusations." I opened my file folder and pulled out the first document. "You mean the way I've been telling the truth about your priorities?" Madison shifted uncomfortably. "Elena, we understand you're grieving, but what, Madison?" "But David's death was just convenient timing for your wedding budget." Her face went white. "I never said that." I pulled out my phone. "Would you like me to play the voice message you left for Jessica? The one where you said, 'Sometimes things just work out.'" Deafening silence. My father tried to regain control. Elena, we came to discuss practical matters. David's estate, your future financial security. My financial security? I laughed sharply. Let's talk about the $200,000 mortgage you took out on your house 6 months ago. His face went white. Let's talk about how you bet your home on Madison's wedding, counting on David's life insurance to cover the payments. I pulled out more documents. Let's talk about the emails you thought I'd never see. I began reading Madison's printed email. Business is business, right, Madison? Well, this is my quarterly report on your character. I read every calculated message, every manipulative strategy, every cold assessment of my grief as a business opportunity. With each revelation, they shrank further into their chairs. Elena, please, you're scaring me. This isn't you, my mother whispered. I understand perfectly, I said. You taught me that love is transactional. Congratulations, you're now bankrupt in both. Madison found her voice. We're still family, Elena. We made mistakes, but family. I stood up, hands flat on the table. Family shows up when someone dies. Family doesn't calculate profit margins while planning funerals. Family doesn't hire lawyers to steal from widows. My father's face flushed red. We never tried to steal anything. I pulled out the final document. Then what do you call this? Their consultation agreement with Morrison and Associates. Hiring an attorney to challenge David's will before you even asked me about sharing his assets? Silence. They had no defense. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, voice steady and professional. You have 2 choices. Sign a public apology acknowledging your actions, or proceed with your legal challenge and face the consequences. What consequences? My father demanded. I smiled, watching them tense up. If you challenge David's will, everything becomes public record. Every email, every text message, every calculation you made about profiting from my grief. The entire community will see exactly who you really are. I pulled out one more document. I've also prepared a countersuit for emotional distress, intentional infliction of emotional harm, and conspiracy to defraud. My colleagues are very interested in this case. My mother was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of panic. Elena, please, we can work this out. We're family. No, I said firmly. We're dissolved, all of us, forever. Sarah finally spoke up. Elena, I know I hurt you, but surely we can... You chose a party over my husband's funeral, I said, looking directly at her. You chose champagne over compassion. There's no coming back from that. I gathered my documents and stood up. You have 24 hours to decide. Sign the apology and accept that you have no claim to David's assets, or face me in court where I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people you are. As I reached the door, my father called out desperately, Elena, we raised you better than this. I turned back one final time. No, Dad, David raised me better than this. You just taught me what not to become. I left them sitting in that conference room, finally understanding that the quiet daughter they'd always dismissed had become someone they couldn't control, couldn't manipulate, and definitely couldn't defeat. The silent partner had just executed a hostile takeover, but revenge was just the beginning. The hardest part was learning to live with the consequences. They signed the apology, not from remorse, but because they couldn't afford the alternative. Over the following months, the effects of their damaged reputation began to compound. Wedding vendors, already nervous about the large outstanding balances, started demanding immediate payment when whispers about the family's character reached them. The mortgage payments they'd been counting on David's insurance to cover were coming due. Without that safety net, and with Dad's business clients quietly distancing themselves, the financial pressure mounted steadily. My parents had to sell their house. The community response was swift and unforgiving. Country club memberships weren't renewed. Business partnerships dissolved. Social invitations stopped coming. My mother called 3 weeks later, voice broken. "Elena, please. Madison's wedding is ruined. Your father's business is suffering. People won't even look us in the eye." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said genuinely. Not sorry enough to fix it, but sorry it had come to this. "Can't we find some way to make this right? We're family." I was looking out at the garden David had planted. His roses were blooming, red and vibrant. He'd never see them, but they were blooming anyway. "Mum, you had a choice at David's funeral. You chose Madison's party. I had a choice after that betrayal. I chose justice." "But we're losing everything," she whispered. "So did I. The day you chose not to show up, I lost my family. The difference is, my loss was forced on me. Yours is the consequence of your choices." She hung up without saying goodbye. The strangest part was how quiet my life became. In the silence they'd left behind, I could finally hear myself think. My colleagues began reaching out. Janet started staying late to chat. Marcus invited me to his book club. Sarah Chen became a real friend. People who chose to be in my life because they actually liked who I was. They wanted my inheritance. I gave them something better, a lesson in consequences. I established the David Hartwell Memorial Foundation. It provides legal assistance to widows and widowers dealing with predatory family members. Every dollar David left me was protecting other people from families like mine. The irony was perfect. I got a letter from Madison months later. Her wedding was postponed indefinitely. She and her fiancé had broken up when the money dried up. His love was as transactional as theirs had been. At the end, she wrote, "I know you probably won't believe this, but I am sorry about David's funeral. I know it was wrong. I don't know how to fix it now." I kept that letter for weeks, trying to decide if that small admission was enough to rebuild something. It wasn't. Some bridges are meant to be burned, especially when they were built on lies. I visited David's grave every Sunday. "I kept my promise," I whispered to his headstone. "Your legacy is safe, and so am I." I wasn't the same person who had stood in that empty church. That woman had been broken by betrayal. This woman had been forged in fire and emerged stronger. 6 months later, I realized the most important thing. I had learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. Standing in that empty church, I had felt both. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. I was still alone in the technical sense, but I wasn't lonely anymore. The people who surrounded me now had chosen to be in my life. Not because of obligation or blood relation, but because they actually liked who I was. What a revolutionary concept. I learned that being alone is better than being with people who make you feel alone. The foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We'd helped 43 families, providing legal representation to people whose relatives tried to exploit their grief. Last week, I received a thank you card from a widow in Denver whose in-laws tried to claim her husband's business. She wrote, "You showed me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. Who shows up." That became my measuring stick for every relationship. Not who promises to show up, not who says they care, but who actually appears when it matters. Some people think family is everything. I think integrity is everything. The truth is, they taught me something valuable. Love isn't automatic. It's not guaranteed by genetics or history. Love is a choice made every day in small moments and big crises. David had chosen to love me every single day we were together. My family had chosen differently. I'd started mentoring other people going through similar situations. There's a whole community of people betrayed by those who were supposed to protect them. Here's what I tell each person I mentor. You get to choose what family means to you. Blood relation doesn't automatically grant someone the right to hurt you. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. I still miss David every day. Grief doesn't have an expiration date, and healing isn't linear. But I'm not the broken woman who stood alone at his funeral anymore. I'm someone who learned that silence can be more powerful than screaming, that justice doesn't always look like forgiveness, that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. So here's my question. Team justice or team forgiveness? Was I right to destroy them, or should I have given them a second chance? Debate in the comments. If this story made you feel stronger about standing up for yourself, please like and subscribe, because sometimes the only person who will protect you is you. And that's not a tragedy. It's a superpower.